Ciao ragazzi! In questa sessione parliamo del presente e ripetiamo come creare il presente dei verbi in italiano. Cominciamo con una frase di Kung Fu Panda. Ieri è storia, domani è un mistero, ma oggi è un dono. Per questo lo chiamiamo presente. Cosa significa? Yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, but today is a gift. For this, we call it the present. So I thought I would start with this quote from Kung Fu Panda so that we can revise the present tense. So, prima di tutto, cosa ricordate? What do you remember from how to form the present tense? So, present tense of regular verbs, do you remember how to do that? Do you remember how to conjugate the present tense of modal verbs and irregular verbs? Let's have a look. Let's revise everything. So, i verbi regolari sono i verbi che finiscono con are, ere, and ire, and verbi che hanno un pattern. So we have a regular pattern. That's why they're called regular verbs. The way they work is always the same, in which we have, let me find a pen. They can end in are, they can end in ere, or ire. What we do is we take are, ere, ire off the verb in the infinitive form, and instead of are, ere, ire, we add these endings. So if it's are, I will add o for io, I for tu, a for lui o lei, iamo for noi, ate for voi, and ano for loro. Ere and ire are very similar, however they change in the third person and in the second person plural and third person plural. So we have o, I, iamo, ete, ono, o, I, iamo, ite, ono. Now, in order to remember them more easily, remember that the first two people are always the same across the three groups. Also, the first person is the same across the three groups. If you look, also this is the same across the three groups. Oh. And the other ones are things that you need to remember. The endings you can remember. So there are some verbs that are regular, so they follow a regular pattern, however they have irregular spelling. These are verbs that end in care or gare, or verbs that end in ciare and giare. So, in care or gare, what happens? We want to keep the sound k and g. So, pago, paghi. In order to keep the sound g, I need to add an h. So, paghi. That's why we have to add an h. Paga, paghiamo, pagate, pagano. So you can see that the irregularity is only for the second person singular and the first person plural. Similar thing happens for the verbs ending in ciare and giare, come mangiare. What happens here is that the verb ends in ciare, so I take are off, and you think, oh, I should add another I there. No, I don't actually. I just need to erase that because the I is already there. So we don't need to add another one. Same thing here. I don't need to add another I. It's already there. So mangi, mangiamo. Now, also in the group of verbs that are regular but have a slightly different conjugation are the verbs that end in I, that want isk. All of these verbs end in ire, and some of them want isk. So, in the whole of the whole of the verbs that belong to ire conjugation, there is a small group of verbs that conjugated conjugates the verbs in a slightly different way. And these ones are capire, preferire, costruire, finire, pulire, spedire. What do they mean? Do you remember? Capire is to understand, preferire to prefer, costruire to build, finire to finish, pulire to clean, and spedire to send. Now this is just a handful, and this is pretty much all you need at this stage. So you don't need many more, and there aren't many more anyway. So what happens with this conjugation? So if I had to conjugate the verb in ire as usual, I would take ire off and I would add o here. But here you can see that instead of adding o, what I'm adding is isco. The same here as here. Isci. Careful with the pronunciation. Isce. We don't do anything here, so these are the good boys and girls, the good children. They always follow the rule. And then capiscono, we also have iscono. The same thing is for preferire and the other ones. So we need to remember the verbs that end in ire. Some of them will have the conjugation in isc. And then we won't say, how do I know if I need to use isc or not? You just need to remember these ones. They're just 6. They're only 6, so we can do it. We can remember which ones they are. Now, these are the irregular verbs. Irregular verbs are a real pain in the arm. There's nothing we can really do with them, is there? So there's no rhyme, no reason. We just need to learn them as they are. So we can find some patterns sometimes, but in general, we just learn them as they are. So if you haven't learned them yet in your first year of learning Italian or your previous Italian experience, can you please learn all of these verbs before your next class? So we also have the reflexive verbs. Reflexive verbs are easy to spot because they end in si. So for example, lavarsi, mettersi, pulirsi o vestirsi. So how do they work? If a verb ends in si, we take si off and this becomes a pronoun. It becomes mi for io, ti for tu, si for lui o lei, ci for noi, vi for voi, and si for loro. Now this is one half of the job done. Now we are left with the verb as a usual verb, so lavare. So what do? I just conjugate the verb as usual. So lavare is lavo, lavi, lava. Laviamo, lavate, lavano. So that's how we conjugate a reflexive verb. First thing we do is we conjugate the pronoun according to the person, then we conjugate the verb according to the conjugation, according to the group it belongs to. Last thing, I verbi modali. Now there are only 3 modal verbs in Italian that we need to know. So volere, potere, and dovere, which mean to want, to be able to, and to have to. So this is the conjugation. Surprise, surprise, they are irregular, so we need to learn them as they are. I'm going to read them for you. Voglio, vuoi, vuole, vogliamo, volete, vogliono. Potere, to be able to. Posso, puoi, può. Possiamo, potete, possono. Dovere, to have to. Devo, devi, deve. Dobbiamo, dovete, devono. Now the peculiarity of these 3 verbs is that they are always followed, they can be followed by another verb because they don't really have an action in themselves. They don't really express an action. If I say I want, what do you want? If I say I can, what can you do? So I have to, what do you have to do? So they have to be followed by a verb. Now you can see that voglio can be followed by a verb or a noun because it means to want. So voglio studiare o voglio un gelato. So I want an object. But if I want to use the modal verbs, I need to understand that they only tell me the mood of my action. So, do I want to study? Can I study? Or do I have to study? So it's very different. The action is always the same, is always studiare, but the mood in which I approach this action is different. Voglio studiare because voglio studiare italiano. However, if I want an object, I can be followed by an object as well. So voglio un gelato. And I'm not even joking with that. I hope that you found this useful and I look forward to seeing you soon. Ciao ciao!